these tickets? Well, you coming?
It's time to go, Las Brisas Stars. I'm super excited. We have the guest conductor here to read to you the Polar Express. I am super excited about this. So please welcome our conductor to read to you guys.
Well, good morning. Now, many of you know that I have a different job most of the time during the year. But one time a year I do something pretty special. And actually, I'm not a conductor, I'm an engineer. I drive a very special train. And I'd like to tell you the story of how I got the job that I do every year. It's a pretty special story. I think you'll like it. One Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly on my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and quietly, for I was listening for a sound my friend told me I would never hear. The sound of the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not the ringing of bells. From outside came the sound of hissing and creaking metal sounds. I looked through my window and I saw a train standing still in front of my house. It was wrapped in an apron of steam, and snowflakes fell slightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars, and he took out a large pocket watch, looked up at my window. I slipped on my slippers and my robe, tipped down the stairs, and out the door. "All aboard!" the conductor cried out, and I ran up to him. "Well, are you coming?" "Where?" I asked. "Why, to the North Pole, of course," was his answer. "This is the Polar Express." I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me on board. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with the sweetest nougat centers, many as white as snow. We drank hot chocolate as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, lights of the towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced on. Soon, there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests, where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from the sound of our train as we thundered through the quiet forest. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran, over rolling peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills into snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the Great Polar Ice Cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "There," said the conductor, "is the North Pole." The North Pole? It was a huge city standing all alone on the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. "Oh, they're gathering at the center of the city," the conductor told us. "That's where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas." "Who receives the gift?" we asked. The conductor answered, "One of you he will choose." "Look!" shouted one of the children. "Elves!" Outside, we saw hundreds of elves as our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole. We slowed to a crawl, so crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped, and the conductor led us outside. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I had ever heard before. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us, and pointing to me, he said, "Let's have that fellow here." And the conductor handed me up to Santa on his sleigh. I sat on Santa's knee, and he asked me, "Well, now, what would you like for Christmas?" I knew I could have anything I could imagine. But the one thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's bag. What I wanted more than anything else was one of the silver bells from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut the bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa, and he stood holding the bell high above him and said, "This is the first gift of Christmas." A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval, and Santa handed the bell to me. I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from Santa's sleigh, and Santa shouted out the reindeers' names and cracked his whip, and his team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us and then disappeared into the cold polar sky. Well, as soon as we got back inside the Polar Express, other children asked me to see the bell, and I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I found was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. "Oh, let's hurry outside and look for it," one of the children said. But the train gave a lurch and started moving. We were on our way home. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and I waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. "What?" I yelled. He cupped his hands over his mouth. "Merry Christmas!" he shouted, and the Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it, and inside was a silver bell. There was a note Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C. I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." I had shaken the bell, but they had not heard a sound. Now, at some time, most of my friends could hear the bell. But as the years have passed, it has fallen silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear the bell or its sweet sound. And though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, as does for all of those who truly believe. So now you're going to have your opportunity to do what I get to do every year, and that's ride the Polar Express.
Thank you. Thank you to our conductor, Shelton. I'm so excited you guys got to hear him read the story. Get ready to board the Polar Express on Friday.